Everyone had already given up on her walking again, until this cleaner showed up, and Richard Taylor urgently needed someone to clean the house. His daughter Emily had been sitting in that adapted chair for over a year, and the last employee had quit the previous week, saying she couldn't handle the heavy atmosphere of the mansion. That's when a young woman rang the doorbell on that Tuesday morning. She held a crumpled paper with the job advertisement Richard had placed in the convenience store of the neighboring district. "Good morning. I'm here about the cleaner position," said the young woman, adjusting her bag on her shoulder. Richard barely looked at her properly. His eyes were red from another sleepless night, worried about Emily's next medical appointment. "Do you have experience?" he asked, still holding the door ajar. "Yes, sir. I've worked in 3 houses before. I can bring references." He sighed. He had neither the time nor patience for long interviews. The house was a mess, and he needed to leave in 2 hours to take Emily to the doctor again. "Can you start today?" he asked directly. The young woman hesitated for a second, but then agreed. "Yes, I can." "Then come in." "My name is Richard. The house is big, 3 floors. You'll work Monday through Friday from 8 to 5. Payment is on the 20th of each month." She entered and looked around. The living room was enormous, with expensive furniture and paintings on the walls, but there was a thin layer of dust over everything. Toys scattered across the floor, clothes thrown on the sofa. "What's your name?" asked Richard, already impatient. "Sarah. Sarah Johnson." "All right, Sarah. The cleaning supplies are in the utility room closet. You can start with the living room and then go up to the bedrooms. Any other questions? Do you live here alone?" Richard tensed at the question. "I live with my daughter. She's 3 years old." Sarah nodded and asked no more questions. Richard went to get Emily from the ground floor bedroom where she spent most of the day. The girl was sitting in the special chair, looking at the window with no expression on her face. "Good morning, my love," said Richard, kissing her forehead. "Daddy hired a new young woman to clean the house. Her name is Sarah." Emily didn't react. Her blue eyes remained fixed on the window. Sarah began working quietly. She put away the toys, folded the clothes, dusted the furniture. While cleaning, she observed the girl sitting in that chair. The child had light blonde hair tied in a loose ponytail. Her thin little legs hung motionless. When Richard passed through the living room carrying a document folder, Sarah turned to him. "Mr. Richard, may I ask a question?" He stopped, already annoyed. "What?" "Your daughter. Doesn't she walk?" Richard's face completely closed off. "That's none of your business. Just do your job." Sarah lowered her head and returned to cleaning. But while wiping the floor near Emily's chair, she noticed something. The girl had moved the fingers of her left hand when she passed by, humming a song softly. It was almost imperceptible, but Sarah was sure of what she saw. During the afternoon, while Richard was upstairs working in the office, Sarah went to the kitchen and started washing the dishes. She hummed again, this time a little louder, a simple song that her mother used to sing when she was a child. Through the reflection in the kitchen window, she saw Emily slightly turn her head toward the music. Sarah felt something tighten in her chest. That girl wasn't completely immobilized. There was something there, some connection that nobody was seeing. When Richard came down to get Emily and take her to the doctor, Sarah was finishing cleaning the dining room. "I'm leaving now," he said curtly. "Lock the door when you're done. The spare key is under the blue vase on the porch." "Yes, sir." She watched from the window as he placed Emily in the car with extreme care, adjusting the girl in the special seat. His face looked tired, aged beyond his years. Sarah estimated he couldn't be more than 35, but he appeared much older. After they left, Sarah finished cleaning the downstairs, but before leaving, she entered Emily's room. It was a large, well-decorated room with pink wallpaper and stuffed animals neatly arranged on the shelves. A small bed was pushed against the wall, but it seemed unused. There was a mattress on the floor, probably where Emily slept. On the walls, framed photos. Sarah moved closer to see better. In one, Richard smiled next to a beautiful woman with dark hair. She held baby Emily in her arms. Everyone looked happy. In another photo, Emily was standing, leaning on a small table, with a big smile on her face. She must have been about 2 years old. Sarah felt a pang in her heart. That family had been happy at some point, but something had happened. She left the room and went home, but spent the whole night thinking about that girl and the small movements she had noticed. The next day, Sarah arrived promptly at 8 in the morning. Richard opened the door with Emily already dressed and sitting in the chair in the living room. "Good morning," said Sarah. "Good morning," he replied, without looking her in the eye. "Today I need you to clean the upstairs too. The bedrooms are a mess." "No problem." Richard went to the office and closed the door. Sarah started working, but this time she had a plan. While cleaning the living room, she hummed again. The same song as the day before. Emily moved her fingers again. Sarah felt a chill in her stomach. She wasn't imagining it. The girl was responding to the music. Slowly, Sarah approached the chair. She knelt in front of Emily and looked into her eyes. "Hi, Emily," she said softly. "Do you like music?" The girl's eyes moved slightly, focusing on Sarah for the first time. "I'll sing for you, okay?" Sarah began to sing once more, now looking directly at Emily. And then it happened. The girl gave a small smile. It was quick, almost invisible, but it was there. Sarah felt tears burning her eyes. That child wasn't lost. She was there, trapped inside a body that didn't obey. But she was there. During the following days, Sarah established a routine. She arrived early, did her cleaning tasks, but always made time to be near Emily. She sang, talked, told stories. And gradually, the girl began to react more. One day, while Sarah was folding clothes in the living room, she saw Emily move the toes on her left foot. "Richard!" she shouted without thinking. "Mr. Richard, come see!" He ran out of the office, startled. "What is it? What happened?" "She moved her foot. I saw it." Richard looked at Emily, who was motionless in the chair as always. "What are you talking about? I swear, Mr. Richard." She moved her toes. "I was singing and she moved them." His face turned red with anger. "You're singing during work hours?" Sarah swallowed hard. "I was just—" "The girl likes music. You were hired to clean the house, not to play with my daughter. Do your job and stop creating false hope." "But I saw it, sir," she reacted. "Enough." He slammed his hand on the table. "One more word about this and you're fired. Understood?" Sarah lowered her head, feeling tears threatening to fall. "Understood." Richard went back to the office, slamming the door. Sarah stood there, trembling. But when she looked at Emily, she saw something in the girl's eyes, a sadness, as if she understood that they had just banned the only person who made her feel alive. That night, Sarah returned to her cramped home on the outskirts. She lived in a small studio apartment with just a bed, an old stove, and a tiny bathroom. But it was hers. She had managed to rent that place after years of living at her sister's house for free. She made a simple pasta for dinner and sat on the bed to eat. Through the window, she could see the lights from the other houses in the alley. Children playing in the street, mothers yelling for them to come inside. Sarah thought of Emily, alone in that huge mansion, confined to a chair, with a father who had given up believing in any possibility of improvement. She couldn't give up on that girl, no matter what Richard said. The next day, Sarah arrived determined. She would do her cleaning job perfectly, but she wouldn't stop connecting with Emily. If Richard didn't want to see her singing, she would sing more softly. If he didn't want her to get too close, she would keep a safe distance but without abandoning the girl. But when she arrived at the mansion, she got a surprise. There was an older woman in the living room, an elegant lady with greying hair tied in a perfect bun. She wore expensive clothes and had a stern expression on her face. "You must be the new cleaner," said the woman, looking Sarah up and down. "Yes, ma'am." "My name is Sarah. I'm Barbara, Richard's mother. I've come to spend a few days here to help with my granddaughter." Sarah felt her stomach tighten. Something about the way that woman looked at her wasn't friendly. Dear listener, if you're enjoying the story, please take a moment to like and especially subscribe to the channel. It really helps us who are just starting out. Now continuing. Barbara walked over to Emily's chair and stroked her granddaughter's hair with a gentleness that contrasted with the hardness in her gaze. "My poor little granddaughter," she said in a melodramatic voice. So young and already trapped in this condition. Sarah bit her tongue to keep from responding. She started cleaning the room, but kept one eye on Barbara. Richard came down the stairs dressed to go out. "Mum, I need to go to a meeting. Can you stay with Emily?" "Of course, my son. Go ahead, don't worry." After Richard left, Barbara turned to Sarah. "My son told me you were doing silly things with the girl yesterday. Singing, talking, making up that she was reacting." Sarah stopped cleaning. "It wasn't silly, Ma'am. She really did react." Barbara let out a humorless laugh. "My dear, I understand you're young and inexperienced, but you need to understand one thing. My granddaughter had a very high fever when she was 2 years old. The fever caused permanent brain damage. The best doctors in America have examined her. There's nothing that can be done. But I saw her move. Those were involuntary spasms. That happens sometimes. It doesn't mean anything. And frankly, it's cruel to give my son false hope. He has already suffered too much." Sarah felt anger growing inside her, but she controlled herself. "With all due respect, Mrs. Barbara, I wasn't trying to give false hope. I was just... You were doing your job poorly. My son hired you to clean this house, not to play doctor. I suggest you focus on your tasks and leave my granddaughter alone." Barbara's words were harsh, but Sarah sensed something more behind them. Fear. The woman was afraid to believe, afraid of being disappointed again. For the rest of the day, Sarah did her work in silence while Barbara sat near Emily reading a magazine. But whenever the grandmother wasn't looking, Sarah would wink at the girl or make little funny gestures. And Emily, even though she couldn't move much, seemed to respond with her eyes. On Friday of that week, another person showed up at the mansion. A middle-aged woman, very well dressed, carrying a large briefcase. "Good morning, I'm the physical therapist, Jennifer," she said as she entered. Richard greeted her at the door. "I'm glad you're here." Emily is in the living room. Sarah watched as Jennifer examined Emily with mechanical and efficient movements. She moved the girl's limbs, performed stretches, tested reflexes, all very professional, but without any human warmth. "How is her condition?" asked Richard. Jennifer closed her bag and turned to him with a neutral expression. "Mr. Taylor, as I've explained in previous sessions, Emily's condition is stable, but there are no signs of significant improvement. We continue with the sessions to prevent her muscles from atrophying completely, but as for the chances of her walking again—" "I know," interrupted Richard, running his hand over his face. "You've told me this many times. I just want you to have realistic expectations. Sometimes parents cling to hopes that—" "I understand, thank you." Jennifer nodded and began putting away her materials. That's when she noticed Sarah cleaning near the window. "Are you new here?" asked the physical therapist. "Yes, I started this week." "I hope you're better than the last one. That woman kept filling Mr. Taylor's head with absurd ideas about alternative treatments, a complete waste of time." Sarah didn't respond, but felt a pang of anger. All those people around Emily had given up on her. No one else believed that girl could improve. After Jennifer left, Richard sat on the couch with his head in his hands. Barbara had gone to the store, and they were alone in the living room, just him, Emily, and Sarah. "Mr. Taylor," Sarah said softly, "may I ask a question?" He lifted his head, tired. "What? What happened to Emily's mother?" His face closed off immediately. "That's none of your business." "Sorry. I didn't mean to be invasive. It's just that I saw the photos in the room and—" "She left us," cut Richard, his voice hard. "Right after Emily became like this. She couldn't handle the situation, said it was too difficult to see her daughter that way, so she packed her bags and left. It's been a year." Sarah felt her heart tighten. "I'm sorry." "So am I," he said, standing up. "But life goes on, and now I need to accept that my daughter will never be like she was before. The doctors said it. The physical therapist said it. Even my mother has accepted it. Only I was still clinging to stupid hopes." He left the room before Sarah could respond. She stayed there looking at Emily. The girl had tears silently streaming down her face. "Hey, hey," said Sarah. kneeling beside the chair and carefully wiping away the tears. "Don't cry, my love. Your father hasn't given up on you. He's just tired and afraid of suffering more, but I won't give up on you. I promise." Emily blinked slowly, as if trying to thank her. That night, Sarah went home with renewed determination. She had lived through something similar many years ago. Her younger brother Thomas was born with a problem in his legs. The doctors said he would never walk. But Sarah's grandmother, Grandma Ruth, didn't accept that. She used old techniques, massages, exercises, songs, and miraculously, Thomas began walking at 5 years old. Grandma Ruth's techniques weren't magical or supernatural things. They were simple stimulation methods she had learned from her own mother, who had learned from her mother, things that poor families in the countryside did when they didn't have money for expensive doctors. Sarah knew that Emily's case was different, but she also knew there was something about that girl that everyone was ignoring. The movements she had seen weren't spasms, they were responses. Emily was in there wanting to get out. On Saturday, Sarah didn't work, but she spent the day thinking about how she could help Emily without being thrown out of the house. Richard was stubborn and proud. Barbara was protective and skeptical. And Jennifer, the physical therapist, was arrogant and closed off to anything unconventional. Sarah needed a plan. On Monday, she arrived with an idea. She would do her work normally, but create small moments of connection with Emily that seemed accidental. Nothing too obvious that would draw attention. When she was cleaning the floor near the chair, she accidentally bumped into a toy that made noise. Emily reacted by turning her head toward the sound. When folding clothes, she hummed softly, so low it seemed like she was just breathing. But Emily heard it and moved her fingers. When she passed by the window, she opened the curtains to let the sun in. Emily blinked and turned her face toward the light. They were small signs, but they were there. Midweek, Richard had to travel to New York for a business meeting. He left Emily in the care of Barbara, who had decided to extend her stay. "I'll be back tomorrow evening," he said, kissing Emily's forehead. "Be good for Grandma." As soon as he left, Barbara settled into the living room armchair with a thick book. "Sarah, today you will clean the entire upstairs. The bedrooms need a deep cleaning." "Yes, ma'am." Sarah went up the stairs with the bucket and rags. She started with Richard's room. It was a large room with an impeccably made king-size bed. There were clothes thrown on the chair and papers scattered on the desk. While cleaning, she saw an open folder on the table. It contained medical reports. Curious, she took a quick look. There were dozens of Emily's test results. MRIs, CT scans, blood tests, all with similar conclusions. Significant brain injury, unfavorable prognosis, minimal chances of recovery. But in one of the reports, a doctor had written something different. It was from almost a year ago, right after Emily had fallen ill. Despite the severity of the condition, the patient shows preserved reflexes in some tests. Intensive physical therapy and constant stimulation are recommended. In rare cases, children of this age may show partial recovery due to neuroplasticity. We should not completely rule out the possibility of improvement. Sarah felt her heart race. A doctor had said there was a chance. Even if small, there was a chance. But that report was buried among dozens of others that said the opposite. She photographed the page with her cell phone and continued cleaning, her mind buzzing with ideas. When she went downstairs, Barbara had dozed off in the armchair. Sarah took the opportunity to approach Emily. "Hi, my love," she whispered. "I discovered something important today. There was a doctor who believed in you, and I believe in you too. But we have to be smart, okay? I'm going to help you, but it has to be a secret for now." Emily's eyes shone with something that looked like hope. Sarah started right then, very subtly. She gently massaged Emily's little legs, pretending she was just adjusting the girl's clothes. She moved her arms as if playing. She gave light tickles on her feet, watching for reactions. And Emily responded. They weren't big movements, but they were responses. The muscles reacted to the stimuli. Barbara woke up suddenly, and Sarah quickly moved away, returning to cleaning as if nothing had happened. That night, Sarah could hardly sleep. She kept planning how she could help Emily without being discovered. She had to be careful. If Richard found out, she would be fired on the spot, and then Emily would be alone again, surrounded only by people who had given up on her. On Thursday, something happened that changed everything. Jennifer, the physical therapist, arrived for the weekly session, but this time she brought someone with her. "Mr. Taylor, this is Dr. Michael Williams. He specializes in pediatric neurological cases and is conducting research on children with brain injuries. I told him about Emily, and he became interested in examining her." Dr. Michael was a man in his 50s, with thin-rimmed glasses and an elegant posture. He greeted Richard and then knelt in front of Emily. "Hi, Emily," he said in a soft voice. "My name is Michael. I'm a doctor and I came to talk with you a little bit. Is that okay?" He began performing simple tests. He shone a small light near Emily's eyes and observed her pupils. He made sounds on one side and then the other to see if she turned her head. He carefully moved her limbs, testing reflexes. Sarah watched everything from a distance, pretending to clean the same piece of furniture for the third time. After nearly half an hour, Dr. Michael stood up and turned to Richard. "May I speak with you privately?" They went to the office. Sarah tried to approach the door to listen, but Barbara was in the living room and watched her with a suspicious look. 15 minutes later, the two came out. Richard seemed dejected. "Thank you for coming, Doctor," he said at the door. "I'm sorry I couldn't bring better news, but if you change your mind about the research, my phone number is on the card." After the doctor left, Richard sat on the sofa and stayed there, motionless, looking at Emily. "What did he say, my son?" asked Barbara. "He said the same thing as all the other doctors, that Emily's brain has suffered irreversible damage, that she'll need care for the rest of her life, that I need to start planning a realistic future for her." "At least he was honest," said Barbara. "He also mentioned he has research on children like her and asked if I would let Emily participate. There would be exams, tests, observations, all free." "And will you accept?" "I don't know. He was clear that it's not a treatment, it's just research, to help other children in the future, but for Emily it wouldn't change anything." Sarah felt like screaming. That doctor had come, looked at Emily for half an hour, and declared there was no hope, without even trying, without noticing the small progress she had made in recent weeks. But she couldn't say anything, not without risking her job. That night, after everyone had gone to sleep, Sarah did something risky. She had kept a spare key to the house, and she returned. It was almost midnight when she silently opened the door to the mansion. Her heart was pounding. If Richard woke up and found her there, it would be the end. But she needed to do it. She went to Emily's room. The girl was sleeping on the mattress on the floor as always. Sarah turned on a small light and knelt beside her. "Emily," she whispered, "are you awake?" The girl slowly opened her eyes. "I know it's late, but I had to come. I'm going to help you, my love, but it has to be our secret, okay? Your father can't know yet. He needs to see the results first to believe." Emily blinked, and Sarah chose to believe it was a yes. She started right then. Gentle massages on her legs, smooth movements of her arms, stimulation on the palms of her hands and the soles of her feet, all while singing softly. She did this for a full hour. And at the end, as she was leaving, Emily did something unbelievable. She lightly squeezed Sarah's hand. It was a small movement, almost imperceptible, but it was there. The girl had moved her fingers on purpose to hold her hand. Sarah held back her tears until she got home. When she finally entered her studio apartment, she threw herself on the bed and cried with emotion. That girl was going to get better. She was absolutely certain. During the following weeks, Sarah established a secret routine. She worked during the day as usual, but 3 times a week she returned at night and spent an hour doing exercises with Emily. She learned to enter and leave without making a sound. She discovered that Richard was taking sleeping pills and dozing off deeply. Barbara had returned to her own home in another neighborhood, and Emily was making progress, slowly, but she was. First it was her right hand which began to open and close, then her left foot, which started to move when Sarah sang, then her neck, which gained more control. Sarah also changed the girl's diet during the day while she was cleaning the house. She prepared natural juices and nutritious soups that Richard barely noticed. She convinced him to let Emily stay near the window longer, getting some sun. All small, all discreet. But it all added up. One day, Jennifer arrived for the weekly session and noticed something different. "Mr. Richard, Emily's muscle tone has improved," she said, surprised. "The muscles aren't as flabby as before." Richard lifted his head from the computer where he was working. "What do you mean?" "I can't explain it. Maybe it's luck. Or maybe that new medicine the doctor prescribed is helping more than I thought." "But you said that medicine wouldn't make a difference." "I know what I said," Jennifer replied defensively. "But sometimes bodies react in unexpected ways. Anyway, it's good news. I'll intensify the exercises." Sarah watched everything from a corner of the room, a small smile on her face. Jennifer was taking the credit, but it didn't matter. What mattered was that Emily was getting better, and people were starting to notice. But not everything was going well. Richard was having financial problems. Sarah found out when she overheard him talking on the phone with a lawyer. "I understand the deadline is tight, but I need more time to raise the money," he said, tense. "The company is going through difficulties, and I've already sold almost everything I could." He hung up the phone and sat down, exhausted. Later that day, Barbara showed up unexpectedly at the house. She and Richard had a heated argument in the office. Sarah couldn't hear everything, but she caught bits. "You can't keep killing yourself like this," Barbara was saying. "She's my daughter, Mom," Richard replied. "A specialized care facility would be better for her," insisted Barbara. "I'll never put my daughter in a place like that," he practically shouted. Sarah felt her blood run cold. They were talking about putting Emily in an institution. That night she went back to the house again, but this time it wasn't just to do the exercises with Emily. She went into Richard's office and looked through the papers on his desk. There were collection letters, notices of overdue bills, and a proposal from a specialized clinic for children with special needs. The monthly cost was high, but still lower than maintaining the large house, the staff, and the private doctors. Sarah felt panic. If Richard put Emily in that clinic, she would never have access to the girl again. All the progress they had made would be lost. She needed to do something. Fast. The next day, Sarah made a risky decision. During lunchtime, when Richard was working in the office, she took Emily to the back porch of the house. It was a beautiful spot, with plants and a view of the garden. Emily never went there because her chair had trouble fitting through the narrow door. But Sarah carried her in her arms. "Look how beautiful, Emily," she said, pointing to the flowers. "Do you see that butterfly over there?" Emily looked in that direction, and her eyes sparkled. Sarah carefully sat her down on a wide bench, supporting her back. Then she knelt in front and held Emily's little hands. "Now I'm going to play a game with you, okay? I'm going to squeeze your hand, and you try to squeeze back. Can you do that for me?" She squeezed Emily's left hand, and the girl squeezed back. Weakly, but she squeezed. "Yes, very good. Now the other one." She squeezed her right hand. Emily squeezed back. "You're doing so well, my love. So well." That's when she heard the voice behind her. "What are you doing?" Sarah turned quickly. Richard was in the doorway with an expression she couldn't decipher. Anger, surprise, confusion. "Mr. Taylor, I can explain." "I asked what you're doing," he repeated, his voice hard. "I was just—" "Emily was restless and I thought some fresh air. You took my daughter out of her chair without permission. You brought her to a place where she could fall. You're—" He stopped mid-sentence. His eyes widened. Emily had just raised her arm by herself. Not very high, but she had raised it, and was reaching her hand toward her father. Richard stood frozen. She just—" "Yes," said Sarah, her voice trembling. She raised her arm. "By herself." Dear listener, if you're enjoying the story, please take a moment to like and especially subscribe to the channel. It really helps us who are just starting out. Now continuing. Richard approached slowly, as if afraid it was an illusion that would vanish if he moved too fast. He knelt in front of Emily and held her small hand. "Emily, can you squeeze Daddy's hand?" The girl squeezed. Weakly, but she squeezed. Richard made a sound that was half laugh, half sob. My God, she squeezed my hand. He looked at Sarah with tear-filled eyes. How? How did this happen? Sarah took a deep breath. It was time for the truth. Mr. Taylor, I need to confess something. I've been working with Emily, not just during the day. I've been coming at night too, without you knowing. I know it was wrong to enter your house without permission, but I couldn't give up on her. I saw she had potential, and no one was paying attention to it. She expected him to yell, to send her away immediately. But instead, he kept looking at Emily, who was now wiggling her toes too. For how long? He finally asked. About 5 weeks. And what exactly did you do? Massages, simple exercises, sensory stimulation. Things my grandmother did with my brother when he was little. He was born with a leg problem, and the doctors said he would never walk. But my grandmother didn't accept that. She worked with him every day, and he started walking at 5. Today he's completely normal. Richard ran his hand over his face, processing it all. You should have told me. I tried, sir, but you didn't want to listen. You were so tired of false hopes that you closed the door to any possibility. He was silent for a long moment. Then he looked at Emily again and saw when she gave a small smile. She smiled, he whispered. She really smiled at me. She smiles a lot now, Sarah said softly, especially when she hears music, and she's starting to have more control of her movements. It's slow, Mr. Taylor, very slow, but it's real. Richard sat on the floor as if his legs had lost their strength. He stayed there, looking at his daughter, tears streaming down his face. I had given up, he said, his voice broken. I had truly given up on her getting better. I thought it was just a matter of accepting and moving on, but you didn't give up. I will never give up on her, Sarah replied, and realized she was crying too. They stayed there on the porch, the three of them, until the sun began to set. And for the first time in over a year, there was something like hope in that house. But hope, Sarah would soon discover, can be a fragile thing, and there were many people about to try to destroy it. The next day, Richard called Jennifer and asked her to come immediately. When the physical therapist arrived, he led her to the room where Emily was sitting in the chair. I want you to examine Emily again, he said, more carefully this time. Jennifer raised an eyebrow but did as he asked. She spent nearly an hour testing reflexes, movements, reactions, and her face grew increasingly surprised. This is impossible, she murmured. Mr. Richard, she has much more motor control than she did 2 weeks ago. Much more. How did this happen? It was Sarah, said Richard, pointing to the cleaner who was tidying the upstairs floor. She has been working with Emily using techniques her grandmother used. Jennifer turned red. Techniques? What techniques? Mr. Richard, with all due respect, a cleaner is not qualified to perform physical therapy on a child with a brain injury. That is extremely dangerous. Dangerous? Richard raised his voice. My daughter is improving for the first time in over a year, and you're telling me it's dangerous. It could be a coincidence, or maybe the medication has finally started to work, but attributing the improvement to homemade massages and folk songs is ridiculous. It's pseudoscience. Then explain to me how, after months of your professional and very expensive treatments, my daughter showed no improvement. And then, in 5 weeks of Sarah's work, she starts moving her arms, hands, and feet. Jennifer had no answer for that. Her face was red with anger and humiliation. Mr. Richard, I am a professional with years of experience and degrees from renowned universities. If you prefer to trust folk healer methods over real science, then I can no longer work here. That's fine, said Richard, surprising himself with his firmness. You're dismissed. Jennifer grabbed her bag with a sharp gesture and left, slamming the door. Sarah had come down the stairs and watched the whole scene. Now she looked at Richard, worried. Mr. Richard, I didn't mean to cause trouble. You didn't cause trouble, he interrupted. You brought hope, and maybe I was a fool to trust people who were just following protocols instead of really caring about my daughter. He approached her. Sarah, I want you to be Emily's official caregiver. I'll increase your salary, and you'll have time during work hours to do the exercises with her. Officially. Sarah felt tears in her eyes. Mr. Richard, I don't know what to say. Say yes. And keep doing the amazing work you're doing. But things weren't that simple. Barbara showed up the next day furious. She had spoken with Jennifer, who told her version of the story. Richard, have you lost your mind? She shouted as soon as she entered. You fired a qualified physical therapist to listen to a cleaner with no training. Mom, Sarah is helping Emily. Sarah is giving false hope. Which is worse? You're setting yourself up for another terrible disappointment, and you're still putting my granddaughter's health at risk. Richard took a deep breath, trying to stay calm. Mom, you need to see Emily. She's moving her limbs. She's responding to stimuli. She's smiling. Involuntary movements. Jennifer told me that children with brain injuries often have spasms that look like voluntary movements, but they're not. You're seeing what you want to see. I know what I'm seeing. My daughter is getting better. Barbara stepped closer to him, her face stern. Richard, you're my son and I love you, but you're making a huge mistake. And when this whole charade falls apart, you'll suffer even more. I won't stay here to watch this. She picked up her purse and turned to leave. But before that, she took one last look at Emily, who was in the chair watching everything with her blue eyes. I'm so sorry, my little granddaughter, said Barbara, her voice choked. Your father is making wrong decisions, and I can't do anything to stop it. And she left, leaving a heavy silence behind. Richard sat down heavily on the sofa. Sarah, who had heard everything from the kitchen, didn't know what to do or say. Mr. Taylor, she said softly, your mother is just worried. She's afraid you might get hurt. I know, he replied, but she doesn't understand. For the first time in over a year, I'm seeing my daughter coming back. Little by little, but coming back. How can I just ignore that? Sarah approached and sat in the armchair beside him. I understand her fear. When my brother started getting better, many people in the family said my grandmother was fooling herself, that it was cruel to give hope when there was none. But my grandmother always said hope isn't cruelty. Cruelty is giving up without trying. Richard looked at her with tired but grateful eyes. Your grandmother was a wise woman. Yes, she was. She's been gone for 5 years, but I still remember everything she taught me, and now I can use that to help Emily. During the following weeks, the routine changed completely in the mansion. Sarah was no longer just the cleaner. She was Emily's caregiver. Richard hired someone else to do the cleaning, a quiet and efficient lady named Dorothy. Sarah now spent the entire day with Emily. In the morning, they did light exercises. She moved the girl's limbs carefully, always singing or talking. Then she would put Emily in the sun for a while. She prepared nutritious meals. In the afternoon, she did sensory stimulation games, and at the end of the day, relaxing massages. Emily was progressing faster now that the work was consistent. Her hands opened and closed almost completely. Her feet moved with more strength. Her neck had much more control. She could turn her head to search for sounds, and she smiled a lot. Richard was transformed. He worked fewer hours at the office to spend time with his daughter. He participated in the exercises, following Sarah's instructions. He sang to Emily, played with her, and for the first time, he saw the girl not as a tragedy, but as his daughter who was fighting to come back. But not everything was rosy. Richard's financial problems were getting worse. One night after Emily had fallen asleep, he called Sarah for a difficult conversation. Sarah, I need to tell you something, he said, sitting at the kitchen table with papers scattered in front of him. My company is doing very poorly. I've lost some big clients and the debts are growing. Sarah felt her stomach tighten. What does that mean? It means I might have to sell this house and move somewhere smaller and cheaper. But Emily is doing so well, I know, and that's why I'll do everything possible to keep you working with her. But we might have to move to a simpler place, a smaller apartment. Would you be willing to continue? Sarah didn't think twice. I'll go wherever Emily is, no matter where it is. Richard smiled gratefully. Thank you. You don't know how much that means to me. But moving houses wouldn't be the only problem. The next day, Richard received an unexpected visit. It was a man in an expensive suit, carrying a leather briefcase. "Mr. Taylor, my name is Edward Miller. I'm a social worker. I received an anonymous complaint that there's a child with special needs being cared for by a person without professional qualifications. I came to check the situation." Sarah felt her blood run cold. She knew exactly who had made that complaint. Jennifer, or maybe Barbara, or maybe both together. Richard kept his composure. "Please, come in. I'll explain the whole situation." They sat down in the living room. Emily was in the chair, watching everything with attentive eyes. "This is my daughter, Emily," said Richard. "She had complications after a high fever over a year ago. She lost a lot of movement, but she has improved significantly in recent weeks." The social worker took out a notepad and began making notes. "And who is taking care of her?" "Sarah Johnson," replied Richard, pointing at her. "She is Emily's caregiver." "Do you have training in physical therapy, nursing, any area of healthcare?" Sarah swallowed hard. "No, sir, I don't have formal training, but I learned techniques from my grandmother, who helped my brother in a similar situation." The social worker made more notes, his face serious. "I see. And is the child receiving regular medical follow-up?" "Yes," said Richard quickly. "She has monthly appointments with a pediatrician. I can show you the receipts." "Please." Richard rushed off to get the papers from the office. Sarah and the social worker remained silent in the room. Emily looked at the strange man with curiosity. When Richard returned, he brought a stack of documents, medical reports, prescriptions, appointment receipts. The social worker examined everything carefully. "I see here that there was a physical therapist working with the child until recently. Why was she let go?" Richard hesitated. How to explain that without sounding completely crazy? "Because there was no progress," he said finally. "And since Sarah started working with Emily, she has improved a lot." "Improved how?" "She's regaining movement. She can open and close her hands, move her feet, turn her head. She smiles, responds to stimuli. Things she didn't do before." The social worker looked at Emily carefully. Then he stood up and approached the chair. "Emily, can you raise your hand for me?" Emily looked at him, then at Sarah. Sarah nodded discreetly, and then Emily raised her right hand. Not very high, but she raised it. The social worker's eyes widened. "When did this start?" "A few weeks ago," replied Richard. "And every day she gets a little better." The man sat down again and made more notes. A tense silence settled in the room. Sarah's hands were ice cold. If that man decided she wasn't qualified to care for Emily, it would be the end of everything. Finally, the social worker closed his notepad and looked at Richard. "Mr. Taylor, under normal circumstances, I would have to recommend that the child be treated only by qualified professionals. But I see that your daughter is being well cared for. She's clean, fed, and apparently making progress. The medical documents are in order, so for now I won't take any action." Richard and Sarah let out the breath they were holding. "However," continued the social worker, "I will return in 2 months to conduct another check, and I strongly recommend that Ms. Johnson seek some kind of official healthcare training. There are quick caregiver courses that can be taken. This would give more legitimacy to the work she's doing." "Yes, sir," said Sarah quickly. "I will look into it." After the social worker left, Richard sat on the couch, exhausted. "That was a close call," he said. "Mr. Taylor, he's right," said Sarah. "I should take a course, professionalize myself. It would help Emily too." "Do you have money to take a course?" "No," she admitted, "but I can pay in installments or see if there's a free one." Richard thought for a moment. "I'll pay for the course. You're part of our life now, Sarah, and if it will help you continue caring for Emily, then it's an investment worth making." Sarah felt tears in her eyes. "Thank you, Mr. Taylor. Don't thank me. You're doing so much more for me and Emily than I could ever repay." In the following weeks, Sarah enrolled in a course for caregivers of elderly people and children with special needs. It was an intensive 3-month course with classes on Saturdays. She woke up very early to take 2 buses to the course location, spent the whole day studying, and returned tired but happy. She was learning so many things: basic physical therapy techniques, first aid basics, how to handle emergency situations, And best of all, she was meeting other caregivers who also worked with people with disabilities. One of them was a man named Robert, who cared for his mother with partial paralysis. "When my mother had the stroke, the doctors said she would never walk again," he shared during a class break. "But I didn't accept that. I did physical therapy with her at home every day. And after 2 years, she started walking with a walker." Sarah told him about Emily, and Robert got excited. "Children are different, right? Their brains have more capacity to recover. If you keep working with her, the chances are good." "The doctors don't think so." "Doctors sometimes forget that every person is unique," Robert said wisely. "Statistics aren't destiny." These conversations gave Sarah strength to continue, and when she returned to the mansion after classes, she applied everything she had learned with Emily, and the girl kept progressing. One day, something extraordinary happened. Richard was working in his office when he heard Sarah shout from downstairs. "Mr. Richard, come quick!" He ran down the stairs, his heart racing. What had happened? Had Emily gotten hurt? Was she feeling sick? But when he reached the living room, he saw Sarah on the floor, smiling with tears streaming down her face. And Emily was standing. Leaning on the chair, trembling with effort but standing. "She stood up," Sarah said with a choked voice. "I was doing the exercises and she just stood up." Richard stood frozen. For a second, he couldn't believe what he was seeing. His daughter, who had spent over a year sitting in that chair, was standing. He approached slowly, afraid that any sudden movement would break that magical moment. "Emily?" His voice came out as a whisper. The girl looked at him and gave a small smile. Her little legs were shaking, but she was there, standing, holding onto the chair. Richard knelt in front of her and opened his arms. "Can you come to Daddy?" Emily looked at the distance between them. It was less than a meter, but for her it must have seemed like an abyss. She let go of the chair with one hand, then the other, and took a staggering step. Richard caught her before she fell, hugging his daughter so tightly that Sarah thought he would never let go, and he cried. He cried as he hadn't cried since his wife had left. He cried out all the pain, all the fear, all the hope he had kept inside. "My girl," he said between sobs. "My girl is back." Sarah was crying too, sitting on the floor, watching that father and daughter embracing. She had done that. She had given that girl back to her father. But the joy wouldn't last long. That same night, Barbara showed up at the house unannounced. She still had the key and walked right in. "Richard, we need to talk," she said, determined. Richard was in the living room with Emily in his arms. The girl had been exhausted after taking that step and was now sleeping peacefully. "Mom, it's not a good time. It's always like this. It's never a good time, but I need to say what I have to say." She sat in the armchair and looked at her son with a serious expression. "Richard, I spoke with a lawyer. She said I can file for custody of Emily if I prove you're not taking proper care of her." Richard turned pale. "What are you saying?" "I'm saying you need to wake up to reality. You're bankrupting the company, about to lose this house, and putting my granddaughter's health in the hands of a young woman with no qualifications. This isn't love, Richard. It's irresponsibility." "Emily is getting better. She took a step today." Barbara shook her head sadly. "You don't understand, do you? You're so desperate for a miracle that you're seeing things that don't exist. A step. She probably lost her balance and you saw what you wanted to see. This will end in tragedy, my son. And when it happens, you'll have no one to blame but yourself." "Get out of my house," said Richard, his voice low but firm. "What?" "I said, get out of my house and leave me the key. You're no longer welcome here." Barbara was shocked. "Richard, go away, Mother, and don't come back until you're willing to believe in me and support my decisions about my daughter." Barbara stood up, pale. She took the key from her purse and placed it on the table with a sharp gesture. "You'll regret this," she said before leaving. After she was gone, Richard sat for a long time, still holding Emily in his arms. Sarah had watched everything from the kitchen, unsure whether to appear or not. Finally she approached. "Mr. Richard, your mother is scared. She didn't mean—" "She meant exactly what she said," he interrupted. And maybe she's right about one thing. I'm risking a lot. I'm losing the company, I'm going to lose this house, and if I lose everything, maybe she really will manage to take Emily away from me. Sarah knelt in front of him. You won't lose Emily. We won't let that happen. And Emily really is getting better. It's not an illusion. You saw her standing today. I saw. But will anyone else believe it? A judge? A social worker? We'll document everything. Take photos, make videos, show her progress, and I'll finish my course and get an official certificate. No one will be able to say she's not being well cared for. Richard looked at Sarah with a mixture of gratitude and sadness. Why do you care so much? Emily isn't even your daughter. Sarah smiled sadly. Because I had a daughter once, and I lost her. She was 4 years old when it happened. It was pneumonia. I didn't have money for the medicine. I worked as a cleaner in 3 houses, but it still wasn't enough. And she was gone. She wiped the tears that were streaming. So when I saw Emily in that chair, I saw a second chance, a chance to make a difference, to save a child, and I won't waste that chance. Richard held Sarah's hand. I'm sorry for your loss, and I'm very grateful you came into our lives. They stayed there in silence, each dealing with their own pain and hopes, while Emily slept peacefully between them. The following days were an emotional roller coaster. Emily kept progressing, but slowly. She could stand for a few seconds, but tired quickly. She could take 1 or 2 wobbly steps, but then needed to lean on something. Sarah documented everything. She took photos, made small videos on her phone. She noted every progress in a notebook, all to have concrete evidence of Emily's development. Richard, meanwhile, was struggling with finances. The company had lost 2 more major clients and debts were piling up. He started getting daily calls from debt collectors. One night, after Emily had fallen asleep, he sat down with Sarah for a difficult conversation. I'm going to have to sell the house, he said. There's no other way. I've already put it up for sale. The realtor said it might take a few months, but it will eventually sell. And where will you go? I found a small apartment to rent. 2 bedrooms, living room, kitchen. It's all I can afford now. It's in a simpler neighborhood, but it has a recreation area and is safe. And my job? Asked Sarah, worried. You continue. I can't pay the same salary, but I'll do the best I can. And if you want to keep working in other houses to supplement your income, I understand. No, Sarah said firmly. My work is with Emily. We'll figure out the money. Richard smiled with gratitude. How lucky I was that you rang my doorbell that day. 2 weeks later, a couple appeared interested in buying the house. They made a good offer, and Richard accepted. In 30 days, they would have to leave. The move was a stressful process. Packing all the belongings, deciding what to take and what to donate, hiring a truck. Richard did everything on weekends because during the week he needed to work. Sarah helped as much as she could. But her priority was Emily, who was getting confused with all the mess and boxes around the house. It's just a move, my love, Sarah explained, while doing the daily exercises with the girl. We're going to a new house, smaller but cozy, and we'll stay together doing our exercises every day. Emily still didn't speak. That was one of the few progresses that hadn't happened yet. She could make sounds, babble, but not complete words. Moving day arrived. The truck parked in front of the mansion, and the movers started taking the furniture. Emily watched everything from her chair, frightened. Sarah picked her up and took her to the backyard, away from the noise and confusion. Look at the flowers, Emily. So pretty. We'll plant flowers in our new home too, you'll see. Richard appeared a few hours later, sweaty and tired. Everything's in the truck. Shall we go? The new apartment was on the other side of the city. It was a simple building but well maintained. 3rd floor, no elevator. Richard carried Emily and Sarah carried the chair and some bags. The apartment was indeed small. The living room and kitchen were one space. 2 small bedrooms, 1 bathroom. But it was clean and had a little balcony with a view of the street. It's tight, Richard said with a sigh, but it's ours, for now. Dear listener, if you're enjoying the story, take a moment to like and especially subscribe to the channel. It really helps us who are just starting out, now continuing. In the following days, they adapted to the new routine. Richard had turned one of the rooms into an improvised office where he worked during the day. The other room was Emily's, with the small bed, shelves with toys, and enough space for the exercises. Sarah still arrived early every day. Now she took one more bus but didn't complain. She did the exercises with Emily, prepared the meals, kept the apartment organized, and Emily kept progressing. Now she could stand unsupported for almost a minute. She could take 3 or 4 steps before needing to hold on. Her arms had much more strength. Her hands could hold small objects. One day, Richard received an unexpected phone call. It was Dr. Michael Williams, that specialist doctor who had examined Emily months ago. "Mr. Taylor, I hope you don't mind me calling. I got your number from the physical therapist who worked with you." "Jennifer?" asked Richard, suspicious. "Yes. She told me your daughter has shown some progress. I got curious. Would it be possible for me to do a new evaluation?" Richard hesitated, but then he thought it would be good to have a specialist doctor's opinion on Emily's progress. "Yes, you can. When would you like to come?" "How about tomorrow afternoon?" The next day, Dr. Michael arrived at the apartment. He glanced around discreetly, clearly noticing the difference between the mansion he had been in before and this simple place. But he made no comments. He just asked to see Emily. Sarah brought the girl from the living room. Emily was dressed in a little pink outfit and had her hair tied in a ponytail. "Hello again, Emily," said Dr. Michael in a gentle voice. "Do you remember me?" He spent the next hour examining Emily thoroughly. He tested reflexes, muscle strength, motor coordination. He asked her to do several things: raise her arms, open and close her hands, stand up, take a few steps. Emily did everything he asked, not perfectly, but she did it. When he finished, Dr. Michael sat on the sofa with an expression that Richard couldn't decipher. "Mr. Taylor, what I'm about to say may sound unbelievable, but I need to be honest. Your daughter has shown significant improvement since the last time I examined her, an improvement that I frankly didn't expect to see." Richard felt his heart race. "Are you saying she's really better?" "I am. Her reflexes are sharper. Her muscle tone has improved a lot. Her motor coordination, although still limited, exists. When I examined her 6 months ago, I would have said she had no chance of recovery. But now I see possibilities." Sarah, who was in the kitchen pretending to wash dishes, but listening to everything, felt tears of joy in her eyes. "And what caused this improvement?" asked Richard. "That's the question, isn't it? The physical therapist told me that you hired a caregiver without official training and that she has been using unconventional techniques." "Sarah," said Richard, pointing to the kitchen, "and she's taking a course now. She'll graduate in 2 months." Dr. Michael nodded. "I'd like to talk to her, if possible." Sarah dried her hands and came into the living room, nervous. "Yes, doctor." "Tell me about the techniques you use with Emily." Sarah explained everything: the massages, the stimulation exercises, the work with music, the sensory games. She talked about her grandmother and her brother. She showed the notebook where she recorded all the progress. Dr. Michael listened attentively, asking occasional questions. "Interesting," he said when she finished. "What you're doing is essentially an intensive form of neurological rehabilitation therapy. It's not that different from what trained physical therapists do, except you're doing it more frequently, with more dedication, and with an emotional connection that professionals rarely manage to establish." He turned to Richard. "Mr. Taylor, I admit I was wrong in my previous predictions. Your daughter has recovery potential. I don't know how far she'll go, but she's definitely not stagnant." Richard was moved. "Thank you, doctor. You don't know how much it means to hear that from a specialist." "May I make a suggestion?" continued Dr. Michael. "There's a clinic that works with pediatric neurological rehabilitation. They have a holistic approach, combining conventional physical therapy with alternative techniques. And they have a scholarship program for low-income families. I can make a recommendation for Emily." "That would be amazing," said Richard, "but I need to make it clear that Sarah continues to be part of the treatment. She is essential to Emily's recovery." "Of course. In fact, the clinic encourages parents or caregivers to participate actively. This will only improve the results." Dr. Michael left some time later, leaving an atmosphere of renewed hope in the apartment. Richard hugged Sarah tightly. "Did you hear? A specialist doctor said Emily is improving, said you're doing a good job." Sarah laughed and cried at the same time. "I knew it. I always knew she would get better." But the happiness was interrupted that same night. Richard received a call from an unknown number. When he answered, it was a man identifying himself as Barbara's lawyer. "Mr. Taylor, I'm calling to inform you that my client, Mrs. Barbara Taylor, is filing for custody of the minor Emily Taylor. The lawsuit will be filed tomorrow at the courthouse. You should seek a lawyer to defend yourself." Richard was breathless. "What do you mean? My mother is trying to take my daughter away from me. My client believes the child is in a risky situation due to the father's precarious financial conditions and the inadequate treatment she has been receiving. She can provide a more stable home and proper medical care." "My daughter is not at risk. She's getting better. That will be determined by the judge. Good night, Mr. Taylor." The call ended. Richard stood still, holding the phone in shock. Sarah had heard everything. "Mr. Richard, she can't do that, can she?" "She can try," he replied, his voice trembling. "And if the judge believes I'm not taking good care of Emily, she might succeed." That night, Richard couldn't sleep. He sat on the sofa, thinking about everything that had happened in the past year: Emily's illness, his wife's departure, the loss of the company, the sale of the house, and now his mother trying to take his daughter away from him. Would it be easier to give up? Let Barbara take Emily. She had money, a big house, could pay for the best doctors. Or Emily would have a comfortable life, but she wouldn't have love, not in the way Richard loved, and she wouldn't have Sarah, who had been the only person to believe that Emily could get better. No. He wasn't going to give up on his daughter. Never. The next day, Richard sought out a lawyer. He didn't have money to pay for an expensive one, so he went to a small office that handled cases for the general public. The lawyer was a young man named Ryan, recently graduated but dedicated. "Mr. Richard, I'll be honest with you," said Ryan after hearing the whole story. "In custody cases, the judge will always look first at the child's well-being. Your mother has superior financial resources, can offer a better home, more expensive medical treatment. That counts a lot. But my daughter is getting better. I even have a statement from a specialist doctor. That's good, very good, but it's not enough. We need to show that Emily is not only receiving adequate care, but that she's better off with you than she would be with her mother. And that means proving that the emotional bond between you is essential for her development." "How do we do that?" "Documentation, photos, videos, testimonies, everything that shows Emily's progress since Sarah started working with her. I'll also request a psychological evaluation of the child to show that she's emotionally stable and happy. And we'll need Sarah as a witness." Sarah, who was at the consultation with them, quickly nodded. "I'll do whatever it takes." "There's one thing," Ryan continued. "Mrs. Sarah doesn't have official qualifications yet, correct? That can be used against you. The opposing side will argue that the child is being treated by someone without qualifications." "But I'm taking a course. I'll graduate in 6 weeks." "Great. But until then, it would be good to get some kind of statement from a healthcare professional saying that your work is beneficial. We already have Dr. Michael, but the more, the better." During the following days, they prepared for the legal battle. Richard organized all the photos and videos that Sarah had taken of Emily, asked Dr. Michael to write a detailed statement about the girl's progress, got testimonies from the neighbors in the building saying that Emily was well cared for and happy. Sarah finished her course faster, putting in extra hours of study. She passed the final exam with top marks and received her official caregiver certificate. And Emily? Emily kept making progress. Now she could walk while holding both hands of an adult. She could say a few simple words like "Mama." She called Sarah that, "Dada," and "Woof woof" when she saw a dog. The hearing was scheduled for 3 weeks later. It would be in a family court with a judge specialized in custody cases. On the appointed day, Richard dressed in the best suit he had. Sarah wore simple but neat clothes, and Emily had on a little white dress with blue flowers. They arrived at the courthouse, and found Barbara already waiting with her lawyer, a middle-aged man in an expensive suit. Barbara didn't look at Richard. She was sitting upright, her face serious, her hands folded in her lap. When they were called, they entered the courtroom. The judge was a man with graying hair, with a tired but attentive expression. A social worker was also present. Barbara's lawyer spoke first. He argued that Richard lived in a small apartment, had serious financial problems, and was putting Emily's health at risk by allowing a caregiver without proper training to care for her. My client offers a spacious home, financial stability, and can pay for the best doctors and therapists in America, said the lawyer in a pompous voice. She loves her granddaughter and only wants what's best for her. Ryan, Richard's lawyer, stood up to counter. Your Honor, it's true that my client has faced financial difficulties, but that doesn't make him an unfit father. He never let his daughter go without anything, and more importantly, he has been the only constant presence in her life since her mother passed away. The grandmother, with all due respect, only appeared recently and is using this process to impose her view of what's best for the child. He presented the photos and videos showing Emily over the months. The difference was striking. In the first photos, she was motionless in her chair, expressionless. In the most recent ones, she was standing, smiling, interacting. As you can see, the child is not in a situation of risk. On the contrary, she is thriving under the care of her father and caregiver, Sarah Johnson. The judge examined the documents carefully. Then he asked to see Dr. Michael's statement. He read everything carefully. "Call the social worker," he said. The social worker, a middle-aged woman, stood up. "I made 2 visits to Mr. Richards' home," she said. "The first was 2 months ago, when he still lived in the big house. The second was last week in the apartment. On both occasions I found the child clean, well-fed, and apparently happy. The apartment is small but organized and adequate. The caregiver shows competence and dedication. And most importantly, I observed that the child has a strong emotional bond with her father and the caregiver." Barbara's lawyer stood up. "Your Honor, emotional competence doesn't replace professional competence. The caregiver only recently obtained certification, and before that, she was treating a child with a brain injury without any qualifications. And she achieved results that no qualified professional managed," countered Ryan, "including results that surprised a renowned specialist doctor." The judge raised his hand, asking for silence. "I will hear the child now." Everyone grew tense. Emily still didn't speak much. How would she communicate? The social worker brought Emily close to the judge. He bent down to her level. "Hi, Emily. My name is John. Can you show me who your daddy is?" Emily looked around the room. Her eyes met Richard's and she pointed at him. "And who is that lady over there?" asked the judge, pointing at Sarah. "Mama," said Emily clearly. Sarah felt tears in her eyes. Emily had called her Mama. "And do you like living with them?" Emily nodded her head. "Can you walk a little for me?" Emily looked at Sarah, who was crying silently. Then she looked at Richard, who smiled encouragingly. And then, holding onto the table for support, she took 3 steps toward the judge. He held her carefully. "You're doing very well, Emily. Very well indeed." He returned the girl to Sarah and went back to his desk. He remained silent for a long moment, looking at the papers, at Barbara, at Richard. "I'll give my decision now," he finally said. "In custody cases, the law determines that the judge must always decide in the child's best interest, and it's clear to me that the child is thriving under her father's care. She has a strong emotional bond with him and with the caregiver. She's showing significant progress in her health condition, and although the father's financial conditions aren't ideal, they are adequate." Richard gripped the arms of the chair firmly. "Therefore, I deny the petitioner's request for custody. Custody remains with the father. Case closed." Richard let out the breath he was holding and hugged Sarah, who was crying while holding Emily. They had won. Barbara stood up quickly and left the room without looking back. Her lawyer ran after her. Outside the courthouse, Richard finally breathed a sigh of relief. "It's over," he said. "Finally over." "Not completely," said Ryan. "Your mother can appeal the decision, but it's unlikely she'll win." The judge was very clear. Richard thanked the lawyer and promised to pay what he could when possible. Ryan just smiled and told him not to worry. In the following days, life returned to normal. Well, the new normal. Richard worked hard to recover his company. Sarah continued taking care of Emily every day, and Emily progressed more and more. 2 weeks later, they received a letter from the clinic that Dr. Michael had mentioned. Emily had been accepted into the scholarship program. She would start intensive therapy 3 times a week, completely free of charge. At the first appointment at the clinic, Richard and Sarah met the entire team. There were physical therapists, occupational therapists, speech therapists, psychologists, all eager to work with Emily. The clinic coordinator, a lady named Dr. Margaret, spoke at length with Sarah. "Miss Sarah, Dr. Michael told us about the wonderful work you've been doing with Emily. We want you to continue being part of the treatment. In fact, we'd like to learn from you too." "Learn from me?" Sarah was surprised. "Yes, sometimes people who care with love achieve results that pure technique cannot. You have something that we professionals sometimes lose, a genuine connection with the patient. That's valuable." From then on, the routine became even more intense. 3 times a week, Richard took Emily to the clinic. Sarah went along and participated in all sessions. On other days, she continued with the exercises at home, and Emily kept improving, faster now with the combination of professional treatments and Sarah's dedicated care. 3 months later, Emily took her first steps alone. It was on a Sunday morning in the apartment's living room. She was sitting on the rug playing with building blocks when she suddenly stood up and walked to Richard, who was on the sofa. 5 steps. She took 5 steps alone, without support, without holding on to anything. Richard picked her up in his arms and spun around with her, laughing and crying at the same time. "Sarah," he shouted. "Sarah, come see." Sarah came running from the kitchen. Richard stood Emily up again and stepped back a few paces. "Come to me, my love," he said. And Emily did. 1 step, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. She walked alone to her father and hugged his legs. Sarah broke down in tears of joy. They had made it. Against all odds, against all the doctors who said it was impossible, against all the people who didn't believe. They had made it. But the story doesn't end here. There was one last thing that needed to happen. Richard, after much thought, decided he needed to try to make peace with his mother. No matter what had happened, she was still Emily's grandmother, and Emily deserved to have her grandmother in her life. He called Barbara a few times, but she didn't answer, so he decided to go to her house. It was a Sunday afternoon when he arrived, holding Emily's hand. The little girl walked slowly, but she walked. He rang the doorbell. It took a while, but Barbara finally opened the door. Her face looked tired, older than Richard remembered. She looked at her son, then at her granddaughter, and her eyes widened when she saw Emily standing, holding her father's hand. "She's walking?" whispered Barbara. "She is," said Richard, "and she'll keep getting better and better." Barbara knelt in front of Emily. "My little granddaughter, you're walking." Emily looked at her grandmother with a serious expression. Then she let go of her father's hand and took 2 steps toward Barbara, hugging her. Barbara broke down in tears. "I'm so sorry," she said between sobs. "I'm so sorry for everything. I was wrong. So wrong." Richard knelt beside them and hugged them both. "It's okay, Mom. I understand why you did what you did. You were scared. We all were." "But I almost ruined everything," said Barbara. "I almost took her away from you, and look at her now. Look at what you and that wonderful young woman managed to do." "Sarah," corrected Richard. "She has a name, and yes, she is wonderful." Barbara wiped her tears and looked at her son. Can I be part of your lives again?" "Of course you can. You're Emily's grandmother. You just need to trust me. Trust that I'm doing what's best for my daughter." "I trust you," said Barbara, "and I'll do whatever it takes to make it up." From that day on, Barbara became a constant presence in their lives. She visited the apartment every week. She brought toys and clothes for Emily, and most importantly, she accepted Sarah as part of the family. The 2 women, initially so distant, became friends. Barbara respected Sarah's work, and Sarah appreciated Barbara's experience and wisdom. 6 months later, Emily was walking almost normally. She still had some coordination issues, but nothing that stopped her from living a normal life. She had started speaking in full sentences. She laughed, she played. She was a happy child. Richard's company was also recovering. He had gotten some new clients and the finances were improving. They weren't swimming in money, but they were stable. And Sarah? Sarah had become much more than a caregiver. She was part of the family. She had dinner with them every day. She took part in decisions about Emily. And Richard, well, Richard had developed feelings for her that went beyond gratitude. One night, after Emily had fallen asleep, he gathered the courage to speak. "Sarah, I need to tell you something." She looked at him, curious. "Yes. I know this might seem strange or inappropriate or whatever, but I can't keep it to myself any longer. I've fallen in love with you." Sarah fell silent, her eyes wide. "I know you came here as an employee," Richard continued quickly, "and I know there's a difference in our situations, but you've become so important in my life, in Emily's life, and I can't imagine our future without you in it, not just as a caregiver, but as part of the family, for real." Sarah was crying. "Richard, I've fallen in love with you too, for months now, but I was afraid to say anything. I thought you would only see me as the maid, or as an opportunist taking advantage of the situation." "Never," said Richard, holding her hands. "You saved my daughter. You saved us. How could I see you as anything less than extraordinary?" They kissed there, in the small living room of the apartment, while the sound of the city came through the open window. From that day on, they were a real family. Not in the conventional way, perhaps, but a family united by love, by struggle, by overcoming. A year later, Richard and Sarah got married in a simple ceremony at City Hall, with Barbara, Dr. Michael, Ryan the lawyer, and a few close friends present. And of course, Emily was there, beautiful in a white lace dress, walking alone to the couple to hand them the rings. Richard's company grew so much that he was able to buy a new house. Not as big as the original mansion, but spacious enough. It had a garden where Emily could play, a large room for her, full of books and toys, and even an extra small room that they turned into a therapy room, where Sarah continued doing exercises with Emily, even though she didn't need them as much anymore. Sarah opened a small special care clinic in the neighborhood, using everything she had learned with Emily to help other children. She didn't charge those who couldn't pay, and many families who were going through the same despair that Richard had experienced found hope there. Barbara became a volunteer at the clinic, helping with administrative tasks and bringing her life experience. She and Sarah developed treatment protocols that combined modern techniques with the old methods that worked. Dr. Michael started sending patients to Sarah's clinic. He had become an advocate for holistic and unconventional treatments, especially after seeing the results with Emily. And Emily? Emily grew up strong and healthy. At 5, she entered regular school. At 7, she no longer had any apparent physical limitations. Only those who looked very closely noticed a slight difference in her walk. She was intelligent, affectionate, full of energy. She loved to draw and sing, and she had a special connection with other children going through difficulties. At 10, she announced to Richard and Sarah that she wanted to be a physical therapist when she grew up, to help other children like her. "I want to show them that it's possible to get better," she said, "that you don't have to give up." Richard and Sarah looked at each other, their eyes teary. The girl everyone had said would never walk again was now dreaming of helping others walk. It was more than a miracle. It was proof that love, dedication, and hope can overcome any diagnosis. And it all started with a cleaning lady who refused to accept the impossible. Years later, on a sunny afternoon, Sarah was at the clinic seeing a new patient when she saw a familiar scene. A 4-year-old girl sitting in a wheelchair, looking out the window with no expression, and a desperate mother explaining that the doctors had said there was no hope. Sarah knelt in front of the wheelchair and looked into the girl's eyes. "Hi, sweetie. What's your name?" The girl didn't answer, but her eyes moved slightly, and Sarah knew. She knew she had work to do. Just as she had done with Emily, she was going to fight for that child, because she had learned an important lesson. Never underestimate the power of love and dedication. Never give up on someone everyone else has given up on, because sometimes the impossible is just waiting for the right person to believe in it. That night, when Sarah returned home, Richard was in the kitchen preparing dinner. Emily, now 15, was studying in the living room, her books spread across the table. "How was your day?" asked Richard, kissing Sarah's forehead. "I met a girl today," she said. "She reminded me a lot of Emily when I first met her." Emily looked up from her books. "And you're going to help her, Mom?" Sarah smiled. Even after all these years, she still got emotional when Emily called her Mom. "Yes, my love. I'm going to help her just like I helped you." "Then she'll be okay," said Emily with absolute certainty, "because you never give up." Sarah hugged her daughter, feeling immense gratitude for everything that had happened, for the decision to ring that doorbell that day so many years ago, for the courage to believe when no one else did, for the love she had found along the way. And as the three of them had dinner together, laughing and talking about their day, Sarah thought that life had a strange way of turning around. She had lost one daughter and gained another. She had entered that mansion as a cleaner and left as part of a family. She had learned that family isn't about blood. It's about who's willing to fight for you when everyone else has given up. It's about believing in the impossible until it becomes possible. And it's about love. Always about love. End of story. Now tell me, did you believe Sarah could help Emily? Leave in the comments what you thought of the story, and if you know someone who also never gave up on a dream. Don't forget to leave your like and especially subscribe to the channel so you don't miss other moving stories like this one. Thank you very much for your company.